Today, we're talking about reactions to Josh Giddey getting his $100 million deal. Next, we're going to be talking about offseason and free agency grades for the Chicago Bulls and what those grades should be. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start with more reactions to Josh Giddey getting his $100 million deal. And so if you've not got a chance to see this, you can head over to YouTube. This is Casey Johnson in his latest YouTube short. And so I believe it came out yesterday. And so he says that this is a win-win. And he also gives us a little bit more detail on the deal. He says that there's no team or player option. And as far as it being a win-win, he talks about how, it's 14 to 15% of the rising salary cap, which is obviously going to be far less than a max player. He talks about how Josh Giddey is just turning 23 in October, and he will be 27 by the end of the deal. And then also, too, talking about how the Bulls did not outbid themselves. And then also, too, lastly, with Josh Giddey and the win-win, talking about how he's going to get, more usage, obviously more responsibility. So Josh Giddey definitely going to have the keys here to the Chicago Bulls offense and really can build upon what he did at the end of the season last year. And so, just talking about how this is a win-win for the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey. And so I'm right there with him. I do agree that this is a win-win situation. In fact, I think that when you just look at the fact that both the team and Josh Giddey met in the middle at $25 million, that's going to be a big difference, for this team moving forward, especially when you're talking about a team that seems to be geared up for next summer. Those margins could mean a lot when you have big decisions coming up with Ayo Dosunmu and then also to Coby White. And so, definitely I think a win-win for the team there. They also waited things out as well. And then I think with Josh Giddey, again, he gets a chance to really kind of take off, prove even more that he was the player at the end of the season. And just to be clear, I mean, he had a solid season with the Chicago Bulls and not just looking at the end of the season stuff. He definitely had a very good season. And so Josh Giddey getting his contract, I think it is a win-win for both sides. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking as far as, was this deal a win-win? Do you think it was more of a win for Josh Giddey, more of a win for the team? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And so next, wanted to go ahead and jump into just now the offseason and the free agency grades for the Chicago Bulls. And so I got a chance to look at this article, which was actually posted yesterday. And so within this article, they're actually just really grading free agency signings. And so they're looking at extensions, obviously Josh Giddey with the restricted free agency stuff, he's in there, but they don't talk about trades. And so Isaac Okoro is not listed, which we're going to talk about that in a moment because we're going to be looking at the offseason grade. And so first, let's start with just the free agency grades here. And so the first player that is graded on the list is Josh Giddey. And so they gave the Chicago Bulls and this signing a B-. And so they do talk about, Josh Giddey and how he was able to shoot the basketball very well from downtown this season, shooting a career high of 38%. They also talk about really what he was able to do after the All-Star break with almost averaging the triple-double at the 21.2 points per game, 10.7 rebounds a game, and 9.3 assists a game. And so they talk about that with Josh Giddey. And so just not going to go too much more into it. You guys can read it if you want to, but they gave it a B-. And so next, with Tre Jones, they gave this a B+. And so with Tre Jones, they talk about how he averaged 11.5 points per game. They also talk about how he averaged 4.9 assists per game, shooting 57% overall. And he was 11 of 22 from downtown and 88% on his free throws. And then they also talk about this interesting point with the Chicago Bulls and this Tre Jones situation in his contract. They say that, look, Chicago isn't close to the luxury tax this season, and has cap space aspirations next summer, it might be best for the Bulls to start Jones' contract high at around 8.2 million, have it descend for the 26-27 to maximize their room, and then go up again in 27-28. So remember, he signed a 3-year deal and they gave this a B plus. And so, first I wanted to start with the free agent, kind of signings and just talking about what the grades are. And so, look, I'm right there with them. I think that this is, to me, I think you can give this a B plus on both of these guys. I'm not sure that I necessarily give it a B minus, especially since, when you're talking about this team trying to get to a plan, AK clearly said that he wanted to bring back Josh Giddey, and I think next is going to be Coby White. So obviously we still have to wait, for that card to be flipped. But I do think that that is certainly something that will be revealed here, is that this team is going to bring back Coby White. Even though I know he's not going into restricted free agency, I do think that this team is going to try to do everything that they can to sign Coby White. And I know also, too, it's going to depend on how well the season goes for Coby White, which I do think it's going to be a good season, which is why I think that this is a B plus for me. And maybe some could maybe argue that it could be an A minus because, for Coby White to take off and for this backcourt to really kind of work, you needed Josh Giddey out there for him to be able to go out there and kind of distribute the basketball the way that he does, the way that he's able to get the rebounds and things like that and get you into the fast break. He helps you defensively by also getting those rebounds. But the fact that he will find you and really kind of throw you open, I think that that's going to be huge for, players like Coby White that want to maybe focus a little bit more on the offensive end and take off that way. I think that Josh Giddey is certainly going to help, these younger forwards that we have on the team that definitely want to get out into space and run, like Monis Vazelis, Dalen Terry, and Julian Phillips. And so, that's why I think that you have to maybe give that a little bit higher of a grade, but not mad at the fact that they at least gave it a B. And with Tre Jones, look, I think that for sure you have to think about giving this an A minus, because for me, I think that Tre Jones is going to play a big role with the Chicago Bulls off the bench. And I said this in yesterday's video. I think that he really made Lonzo Ball an expendable piece, because he was able to really come off, really just be that point guard that kind of calmed the team. He also had to start as well. And you just got a chance to see how well he can distribute the basketball. One of the points that I love that is really brought up in that article is that, yes, he scored the basketball well from downtown, and that was on low volume. And I think that he's probably going to be a guy that can maybe up the volume a little bit more. And so I think that you're going to see his 3-point impact a little bit more this season. But more importantly, I think that you're going to see what he can do as far as kind of opening up the floor for others out there. And that's going to be important in the second unit. And also, too, this could also help Josh Giddey as well, because if you do need to bring somebody in there to kind of give you some good minutes along the way, or also too, he can suit up beside Josh Giddey in some of these lineups and stuff too as well. So I think that really you just strengthen your backcourt when you bring Tre Jones in. And I think that this was just a great signing, for what you want, and just fits the playing style and everything else. And so great signings for both both players for this team. And then next, just talking about just the offseason move for the Chicago Bulls, and just will really grade it as a whole with everything. But I do think that this is probably a grade, or not a grade, but this is probably a move that I should say is probably underrated with Isaac Okoro. I think that once he gets a chance to really get out there with this team, show what he can do defensively, I think that that is going to be a huge impact for this team, because I think that a lot of people, just fans, and just maybe people that create the content around the Chicago Bulls talk about the offense, which is true. I mean, the offense is great, but I just have been saying this, or I've been saying this for a long time, that in order for this team to really take it to the next level, defensively, they're going to have to turn it up. I think that it has to become a part of your identity. And I think that Isaac Okoro really has a chance to do that. And what I like about this trade is really that he's coming in with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, a lot like Josh Giddey, coming in where, it just didn't work out towards the end and just kind of being phased out a little bit with the rotations or whatnot. And so I think that Isaac Okoro gets a chance to come in and show that he can definitely be an impactful player. He can play major minutes. And so we'll see if he's able to fight for the starting lineup. I do think he's going to be right there. But if he does come off the bench, it's not going to be like it was in Cleveland. Like, he's going to get some significant playing time. And I think Billy Donovan is going to need to depend on him a lot, because I'm just not sure that Patrick Williams is going to be able to turn it around. And so I think that there's going to be a ton of minutes here for Isaac Okoro. And I love the fact that just his athleticism, that's going to allow him to get some scores. I think the question now is, can he develop a little bit more offensively, be able to be a little bit more of a creator for himself and his teammates? But I definitely think he has a chance to be a very good 3-and-D type of player on this team. But I think he can take it to the next level after that if he can show that he has a little bit more in his offensive bag. And at this point in time, the Bulls are looking for a spark, and it could be Isaac Okoro. And so for me, I think overall the offseason grade for the Bulls, I'm going to give them, I think overall for me, I'm giving them a B plus. I think it was at least a B plus for me. Again, you can maybe argue that's an A minus. And I would say this: the Bulls didn't necessarily need to go out and make a huge splash by making a major trade. They didn't need to necessarily bring in a big name, which, maybe would have gutted the roster by doing so. And so I think right now, what you're doing is you're giving yourself a chance for this plan to really play out. Because, if Modest Buzelis does take off this next season, which I think a lot of us do anticipate that he's going to, I do think he's going to take the next step forward. He gets a chance now to really now show that, hey, AK knew what he was doing with the draft, and we're hoping that Noah Asenge can also take the similar path. And really, if these players can show that, look, they can at least be star players, not necessarily franchise players, that definitely changes the direction of this team in a hurry. And so that also, too, would perhaps get you a more, like, get you more on the radar for some of the superstar players that might say, okay, look, the Bulls have something cooking here. They might want to come there. And so I think that kind of puts you out there. And then also, too, you could be maybe you find a franchise player out of these guys. And so we'll see what happens there. I think with Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, we talk about them a lot, but I think that this is the year that really you just answer those questions of if they can really be impactful for your team. If not, this is kind of where it plays into your plan of really just opening up the salary cap and things like this. Like, this is where, I think AK, Mark Eversley, they're going to have to be smart with what they have with these expiring contracts. And then also, too, moving off players that don't necessarily fit your long-term plan. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments, do you think that the Bulls at least had a B plus with their offseason and free agency grades? Do you think that the free agency grades given out here by ESPN were a bit low? Do you think they were too high? Once again, they gave Josh Giddey and that signing a B minus. With Tre Jones, they gave it a B plus. And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there. And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, man. Peace.